so much, we cannot evacuate so much. With those, if you evacuate so much, we cannot distribute so much. In the meantime, upstream, we're still going ahead with the construction of new power structures and so on and so forth. But at home, we don't have power. In the offices, in the industry, we don't have power. Regular, constant, and affordable power supply. What is the issue?
Well, thank you very much again, Kingsley. The issue is usually your weakest link is your strength in the power system, in the power value chain. That means the last point that could connect you is the last that will give you power. Currently, like the Honorable Minister did explain, we have an installed capacity of about 13,000 megawatts. Now, out of this, about 7,500 is available. But coming down to transmission, it's been reported that we have about 7,000, and in some cases it's been reported 8,000 megawatts of ability to transmit power from the generation end to distribution end. Well, when you get to the distribution end, you find the maximum capacity that has been recorded is about 5,300. Now, unfortunately, the power that you take into the homes is subject to what particular distribution infrastructure you have around those homes. So the entire issue is that for you to have power stable, you have to have the system fully aligned. In the first, just like the Honorable Minister said, what we have seen is development that are isolated. Because the sector has been privatized, the generation companies are working independent. The transmission system is also, of course, working independent, and distribution company working independent. So you are faced with a situation where you must, first of all, ensure that the handshake, the interface between the parties is aligned and working. And one of the new things that this particular administration has done, which is quite commendable, is the fact that the Honorable Minister, and indeed Mr. President, through the Presidential Power Initiative, which sometimes can be called as the National Education Roadmap, is such that you are able now to ensure that you have a company like Siemens with very high track record coming in to ensure that those interface issues that don't allow power that is generated to get into the transmission system and then move on into distribution systems are handled. So what happened in the Siemens program is that at the highest level of the two governments, that is the government of Nigeria and Germany, the two presidents saw the need to agree to work together to support the Nigerian power system. And in doing so, Siemens was identified as the company that is going to be able to do this particular exercise. What Siemens is going to do is simply to ensure that all those bottlenecks are being addressed harmoniously, and then both distribution and transmission are able to work around the sector seamlessly.
I just wondering, Engineer Yabo, explain again the role of Siemens. Siemens is not a new company in Nigeria. I mean, they've been around for decades. And one would wonder why they were not tapped early on, to help clear up the clogged areas along the value chain. So exactly what is Siemens going to do? Is it now a magic bullet that will help us resolve the issues between generation and transmission, and then again between transmission and distribution? Because we keep hearing about inadequate infrastructure. At some point, they were talking about the loop. The transmission loop was weak, it was aged, they needed to change it, and at some point they said, okay, the arc is now almost completed so that we can have a full cycle. So exactly what is Siemens coming to do, and exactly what is it doing now?
Now, Siemens is going to have to do rehabilitations and in many cases expansion. The program is structured into 3 phases. Phase 1 is going to identify some quick wins that will allow the evacuation of the about 2,000 megawatts stranded. If you remember, I mentioned the fact that generation has about 7,000 megawatts that is currently available, while transmission is also having something within that range, but the ability to take that power into the distribution company is impossible. Now, what Siemens will do within the phase one is to ensure that the power that is being generated and transmitted at 7,000 megawatt level is also delivered into the distribution companies and into the customer space. So essentially, this is the main focus. Before now, it has been isolated planning. But under this current arrangement, it's going to be an end-to-end system. Now, as well, like the Honorable Minister has mentioned earlier, by this particular thing could be achieved within the shortest possible. In fact, the target is to finish by 2021. Now, moving on, already about 13,000 mega of installed capacity is available. But then, don't forget, even if you have this capacity, you need somewhere to take it for you to be able to deliver it to customers. So the next batch, phase 2 of Siemens work, is also going to be able to ensure that additional transformation and distribution systems are put together. And this work is being done in sync with both the stakeholders together. That means Transmission Company of Nigeria and Distribution Company of Nigeria as well. So in essence, what Siemens is doing is aligning the entire value chain through coordination, as the Honorable Minister has said. Because once you don't coordinate, once you don't have a common vision, it's going to be extremely difficult for you to be able to deliver on the demands of the sector.
Yes, Engineer Farouk Yusuf, we're still going to remain with you for now because you know, the unbundling of the power sector was greeted with a feeling of nostalgia among Nigerians, and that we believe that immediately that unbundling exercise was completed, that things are going to be turned around in the power sector. And now many Nigerians say justice for positions, you know, buying up, you know, what they could. That's why we have the Gencos and Tiscos and what have you. And now, in the long run, we begin to hear the fact that these companies are not well fortified in terms of equipment. They begin to complain about equipment, facilities, inability, incapacitation at different levels. Now, if you bring in Siemens, how is Siemens going to work with these companies? Because if we're talking about alignment, it means that you have to deal with them. What is the business format that will enable Siemens to operate freely without difficulty, knowing full well that we have people who have bought up the companies that are instrumental to what we're doing?
Now, Siemens is actually meant to come with the silver bullet, if you like. Now, the issue is, if you remember, the power sector privatization that was done has a fundamental issue which has been discussed severally. Now, the issue is, the key issue here is the fact that here we are with a privatized sector, but a sector that cannot attract lending. Power system is highly capital intensive. So by the basis of privatization, the whole idea is to be able to attract additional financing into the sector. But unfortunately, when the companies were handed over in 1st November 2013, clearly there were a lot of bankability issues around them. Here I mean the ability of the companies to, on their balance sheets, attract lending. Unfortunately as well, the owners, that is the preferred bidders, turns out also to be companies that may not necessarily have the cash, the liquidity to be able to do this investment. And so the entire privatization of the sector, which was aimed to attract investment, to attract expansion, turns out to be a privatization that is actually static. And don't forget, the entire value chain has to align for you to be able to walk around. If you take, for instance, starting from gas generation, Nigerian electricity industry is a mix of gas and hydros. And then for you to be able to generate power from gas, you ought to buy the gas. As at the time this privatization was done, the mix is in the range of 20 for hydro and then 80 for gas. And if the gas industry, the pricing framework is not fortified to be able to allow for effective gas supply into the industry, you end up having a lot of issues. Now, beyond that, the distribution companies in particular that have been around were hinge on tariffs that are targeted around forex, around gas prices, around inflation, and most importantly, around the total amount of energy that can be pushed into their networks. So looking at all of this, without investment within the distribution companies, you have a lot of gaps that created liquidity issues where generators are pushing power at maybe the range of 5 megawatts. The transmission is peaking power, but distribution companies are unable to take this power. So you have a situation where the total payback into the market is less than 30% at some point. So this created that latitude, and that is what the Siemens program is coming to actually address by virtue of aligning the system so that the entire value chain will be able to function as a commercially viable entity.
Engineer Farouk Yabo, thank you very much. We'll return to the issue of alignment of the value chain. Let's come back to the Honorable Minister, Engineer Saleh Mama. Engineer Saleh Mama, while you were indicating the accomplishments in the power sector in recent times, you did talk about your initial observation. When you came in, you found that critical segments of the power sector were reporting to one body, another one reporting to another body. And the question that arises immediately is, what did you find to be the effective role of the Regulatory Commission? Because under the privatization program, that once you unbundled and you privatized, you needed to have an effective regulator. What have you found in terms of the role of the regulator, helpful or otherwise?
Thank you very much. I can tell you it's helpful. And but the only predicament here I have with the regulators, these are the issue of law. The issue of law. They have been established by law. And it is their responsibility to regulate. And it is their responsibility when there is problem, a such problem, is for them to come in. My, as a minister, is just a policy direction. Assuming, let's say, you want to say, okay, you want to increase your tariff. Then I will now ask, have you now improved your power supply? Have you not metered your customers? So that one, I should make sure that is done before now the next should sanction whoever that is responsible for whatever.
Okay. Yeah, but the point always arose that NERC itself, that's to say the Nigerian Electricity Regulatory Commission, was handicapped in sanctioning errant players in the value chain because government had its own collateral responsibility which it wasn't fulfilling. How are you going to resolve this? Because Engineer Yobo tells us, okay, Siemens is coming to streamline. Is Siemens going to be a super player above NEC? Is Siemens also now going to take on the responsibility of government? Exactly what are we getting at? I'm asking these questions because the more you, as it were, disaggregate the issues in the power sector, the more we find that there are pieces that do not quite fit to make us see that the puzzle is now a whole. Something gets left done on somewhere, and that thing gets left undone. With the issue of NBET is there, which is the bulk electricity trader, what it is doing, how well it is doing it, and so on and so forth. So what is the handicap of NEC from what you have found out, and how is this being dealt with?
Well, one of the handicap of NEC is maybe it is the responsibility of the NEC whenever such thing happen, to call on the license or the agreement between the discourse and maybe distribution or transmission company. And